A very warm good evening to our viewers and welcome to the Evening Review Show. I'm Matthias Ofiko, news editor of the Namibian Sun newspaper. Well, during the past weeks we have seen that the Namibia Statistics Agency is well underway to carry out the census exercise. Of course, there's been a lot of talk in the public domain as to how the exercise is going. Well, some critics this side, also some really praising the NSA team for the work being done so far. Of course, that process is still not done and it's ongoing, and I hope you are doing your part to open your door to the enumerators. But for that, we have in studio tonight the NSA board chairperson, Mr. Salomo Hei. Good evening and welcome, sir.
Good evening, Matthias, and good evening to your viewers, and thank you for having me.
No, it's always a pleasure. Perhaps just as an icebreaker, can you just give us a brief summary as to how the process is going? Is everything still going according to plan?
Yeah, so thank you, Matthias. I think, as you said as you alluded to in your introduction, this process goes a long way back. Remember the initial process with mapping exercise, essentially looking at structures and houses, started around 2021, right? So what then happened is that 2022, the census did not take place, and subsequently it was then deferred to 2023. So in 2021, we did have a baseline in terms of the structures or houses that were constructed. Because remember, the plan is to make sure that we count every household. So when we started with the exercise of listing, right, in terms of using the baseline for 2021 on the mapping exercise to the listing, which started from the 18th to the 24th of September, right? Then after the listing, obviously through the listing process, we were also making appointments, or rather the enumerators were making appointments to sort of make sure that on which date they can come to do the actual counting. Yeah. Then after that, the 25 to now the 6th of October was essentially the process of counting, right? And that has gone. Well, again, there were a few challenges in terms of some refusals where we needed to sort of go back to the Act in terms of what the Act says in relation to census. Obviously, the Act is prescriptive in terms of if someone refuses to be counted, we should inform them of what the Act empowers the NSA with, right? So obviously, once we inform you that we are deriving this particular assignment from the Act, and you continue with not wanting to cooperate, we would then have to institute the next steps, right? Which is then get the police involved, which can lead to an arrest, which can lead to a fine or an imprisonment, right? So during this process of the enumeration from the 25 to the 6th of October, we did have cases like this, and we would also know that we needed to rely on the Act again, and subsequently those particular establishments have then to cooperate, right? So we did not have to go further than just making sure that we are empowered by the Act and it's a national assignment. The 25 to the 6th, that process now has sort of come to an end, but we now in what we refer to as the mopping exercise, right? So the mopping exercise is really to look at to what extent did we not go. You've got Matthias, who was perhaps not at home during the time that the enumerator was there. The numbers are there on the social media platforms. You can call and make the necessary arrangement for these enumerators to come back to the house. So this is a mopping exercise now. We're just really mopping up and making sure that everyone is accounted for. I mean, look, you must remember that it's an exercise that involves human behavior, and from time to time you would have the challenges that we experience. And this is why we have opened a certain level of flexibility as the NSA to say the mopping exercise can actually run until the 16th, right? Just to make sure that there could be issues that we didn't account for, and there's more cases, and so, but generally, so the mopping exercise then would have had to stop on the 13th, but we're more than happy to maybe keep certain enumerators on standby for the particular period until the 16th. In terms of performance, how far we are and how well we are doing is that we have covered quite a bit of ground. I mean, the SCOMAS is in terms of response rate, and from a performance perspective, they're the highest, just over 86, followed shortly by Msati. They have also done very well, and then obviously Oshana. These are some of the regions that have done quite well. They're all above the 80% mark in terms of. So if the question now is then on how are we able to arrive at an 80% or 90%? And remember, I made reference to the initial mapping exercise that happened in 2021. Then I made reference to the listing process that started from the 18th to the 24th of September. So then you're able to say, look, if there was listing of these households, if you look at the mapping of 2021, this is why we've got the mop-up period, right? In the event that from 2021, right, in terms of the mapping exercise, and then the listing exercise could have been that now there's a new structure, there's a new house that has been constructed since the last time we were there. So this process will then account for that. Again, in commerce, if you look at where are we seeing the greater response rate or the greater performance, if it were, I mean, it's in areas like John Pandeni, I mean, that's well over 90. Certain areas like Windhoek East is lagging behind, and typically these are the people that most probably work, and then there's no one at home and that sort of thing. And this is why we could run into the weekend. So at a national number, we've just breached close to just below 80, around 70-75% in terms of performance. We hope to make sure that by the time this week come to an end, we would really have reached the target. I mean, there have been isolated cases of refusal that we have nipped in the bud quite quickly, because it's not an exercise that's got to do with the NSA, but it's really an exercise that have got to do with the country. To inform the country, you know, there's a lot of data that we have to rely on, for instance, on the elections that will come as a consequence. There's a lot of, in terms of policy directive, in terms of interventions, and so maybe that's really the lay of the land at this stage.
Talk to us about public education, the period running up to the commencement of the exercise. Because we've seen really the public, some of them complaining, saying, but why do you need to ask me if I have Wi-Fi? Why do you need to ask me this type of questions? What is the essence of these questions?
So Matthias, if you remember that there were certain, for instance, settlements that then want to become village councils, and within that particular exercise, you need to demonstrate certain population numbers, income levels, and right? Now, the census is really a baseline in terms of sample identification for all the other surveys that might come. Remember, there's always a complaint that we've got data that's outdated. We've got data perhaps on the household income and expenditure survey. This is outdated. So when you see the question on what is your income bracket, for instance, is really to be able to assist with the income and expenditure survey. You know, access to appliances in terms of Wi-Fi, in terms of fridge, in terms of microwave or whatever it is.
How many TVs do you have in your house?
Yes, how many cars do you have? Where do you derive your lighting from? This is all really to inform the demographics, right? Typically, you know that a household in Windhoek East will look different from a household in John Pandeni or from a household in Okonjatu, you know. But what you could potentially see is that 10 years ago, perhaps in the rural areas, you did not have the power that we have now, you know. So what does that mean? It means that there's been an improvement, right? But it also means that perhaps there's now a case to be made for additional proper housing, you know, from an NHE or whoever that construct houses. On the income side, you really want to gauge what is the income level within that particular constituency. And through that, you would have different interventions. You would have different subsidies, if it were. You would have different price ceilings, if it were, for services in that area. But you would really be able to have an understanding of where Namibia is in terms of its household disposable income. You'll be able to know the access to appliances as a basis to look at standard of livings. So there is quite useful information that's going to come out of this exercise, because the sample that we're going to draw in, because remember that this is now a total whole country where you want to account for every household, right? Now, for the GDP and inflation, those surveys, you don't necessarily go to every household, you take samples, right? Yeah. But this will be able to give you a very good sample in terms of to have representative sample. So you'll be able to know John Pandeni looks like this, you'll be able to know Windhoek East look like that, you'll be able to know the constituencies in the rural areas looks like this, and so these are really the sort of information that we want to extract from the demographics or from the Namibian population. So in terms of your specific question, whether we did a lot in terms of public awareness, education, I think you can only do so much. I think we have tried. Also within the budgetary constraints, I mean, we have really tried to educate. And where the awareness and the information was not clear, we had to act in the manner that we did in terms of really informing some of these establishments, of some of these individuals. It's isolated cases of why we're carrying out the exercise. I don't think we have found anyone yet. No one was picked up from by the police yet.
Luckily not.
Luckily not. But at least the cooperation has come, and we needed to do what we have done to date.
Yeah. I mean, like any other exercise of this magnitude, I'm sure there was some anticipated, whether it's incidents or concerns that you and the team had. Has those transpired, or did you manage to put adequate resources and manpower in place to curb those initial concerns?
Yeah, well, look, the first one is really, there was a big concern around the procurement component of the work, right? Because, I mean, it's huge government capital outlay for this particular project. Remember that previously we would use the NSA surveys to identify companies that participate in this particular exercise. We had to get exemptions. We sort of piggybacked on the template laid down by the Electoral Commission. So what we wanted to do was a very sort of strategic intervention to make sure, how does this exercise become broad-based? Right? Broad-based to the extent that people that are within the constituencies get employed there. People that have got cars in that constituency get to use these cars on a rental basis. And you could ask me why we did that outside of the broad-based component and making sure that we can have a circulation of money and understanding the unemployment rate. But what is key, Matthias, is that you've got enumerators that are walking around with tablets. Right? Now you need to understand that there is an element of criminality that could come. Right? Now, if you have Matthias who is from Keisopmund in Wolfish Bay, he gets employed there, he's the one with tablets. If an incident happens, right, Matthias is able to identify who could have been the culprit or who could be the, because he's within the area. So it also deters potential criminality, right? But at the same time, if you understand the area, it means that you would be able to go back to that area, especially during the mopping exercise, to say, no, but this house, I wasn't there, and that sort of thing, because you understand what the country, or rather what that particular area look like, you know. Again, if you go to the more rural areas where we tended to move with the vehicles in those areas, is that there are different terrains, Matthias, and different terrains obviously requires different responses or applications. So if you've got a car in a rocky or sandy area that you have never driven before, now you get put there, it could be a problem. You know, it could be your car break down, the necessary caution that should have been that you should have applied did not take place, and subsequently it could lead to another challenge and then a breakdown and all of these things. So And these were some of the challenges that we faced in terms of why we're doing this. It's difficult to do this particularly in that manner. And also the expectations, I mean, from the Namibian people in terms of the unemployment rates that we have and how, I mean, we had around 13 to 15,000 positions. I mean, the response was overwhelming, you know, in terms of almost close to 100,000 people applying for these positions because of really the opportunity that came.
Yeah.
So
let me hold your thoughts on that, because that was going to be my next topic. The selection of enumerators was going to be, because it's usually a hot topic. And we'll head for a short break quickly. I just want you to gather your thoughts around that, and we'll come and touch on that.
Thank
Well,
you.
to the viewers, we head for a short break, and we'll be back to continue this conversation.
Hello and welcome to today's Sports Rep Show.
I am your host, Jesse Jackson Kauraifa. In replay, Namibia, who had won the toss for the first time on this tour.
Good day everyone, time for international sports news, starting off with tennis news, both on the WTA for women's and
Well, welcome back from the short break. Mr. Hei, just to continue the conversation before we went on to the break, the issue of the selection of enumerators is normally a very hot and very topical issue. We know, of course, mainly because of the high unemployment rates in the country. Everyone wants a job, whether it's a temporary arrangement just to put some bread on the table. How was that executed in terms of fairness? How did the team make sure that, really, guys, we have to keep this above board? And the selection should be one that really represents all corners of the country.
Yeah. So thank you, Matthias. Again, the criteria was really to give the unemployed an opportunity to participate, because we wanted to make sure that the broad-based message filters through across the board, and also an opportunity for Namibians to get in and gain experience for the next survey, for the next census, but also maybe for the next elections, because then you would have understood the data collection process, the ethics around it, and so there was a minimum qualification, right, that we required from everyone, and also in areas perhaps where one understood what the Namibian conditions or environment look like. We're ready to sort of look at what are the flexibilities. You know, remember there was the issue around Chunkwe, where there was an outcry on selection, and we had to go back and assess and really clarify and look at what is it that the NSA can do to make sure that those marginalized communities get a chance to participate in the census. So what we did is as the applications came in, we had to filter the applications in terms of who meets the minimum qualifying criteria. As soon as it was determined, obviously then they went into a pool. And then we had to look at, obviously, the area of constituency where this person is, the qualifications. And once that happens, then one has to try and obviously look at the employment status of this particular person, you know. And how do you do that, Matthias? And this is all part of why the census is so important, you know, because you're building a baseline that will be able to have coordinated mechanism of statistics, right? And in the more advanced economies, you have what we refer to as population registers, right? So what population registers do is that you are able to identify people by virtue of their identity number, right? So if one is able to put in your identity number, the system is so interlinked that even NAMRA should be able to pick up, right? To say, no, but the gentleman is employed, he paid his tax last month, so he doesn't qualify. Social security is another avenue that we explored to say, look, what can we do as social security in terms of making sure that we filter those that are employed not to be part of this particular process, you know. But you can only do so much. You know, remember that we're speaking of close to over 100,000 people that applied for this particular exercise. You only need 13,000 people. So you are going to have cases where a few really fall through the cracks, you know, fall through the cracks in the context of the they don't get picked up by the system because of the time lag it takes for me to get the information back from NAMRA in terms of who's employed and who's not employed of this list of people. The information, the time lag it takes for me to get the information back from Social Security. The work has to start, you know. So those are the sort of dynamics that one had to consider. In terms of the cars, Matthias, again, because you're not really dealing with human beings, you know. So again, we looked at constituency, we look at the cars, we look at the owner, we look at the representative and where they are. And as soon as that list came, it came down to a random selection, you know, because how do I determine? Because, you know, so this random selection meant that it just throws out in that constituency who's number one, what number plate is number one, or who, and then it comes down. So we need 15 cars, the first 15 names that this random selection through a computerized system comes through, those ones are selected, then the list remain. So if something happens to this guy, it's no longer fit for purpose, windscreen or whatever happens and stuff like that, then we take from that list coming up. So we really tried to be as fair and equitable as possible to the extent that we can, and we really think that in the main we have met those objectives. I mean, remember, you would rather want to see these cars being utilized by individuals and as opposed to just allocating a huge component of the budget to one company. And I think it has worked well. You know, it has worked well. Again, there were cases where people were grieved, you know, but you can only deal with what's in front of you, and you can only deal with what's in front of you in terms of evidence, you know. And where we did not take action is really because there was a lack of evidence. Where there was compelling evidence to say equity was not applied or fairness was not applied, the NSA went the extra mile.
Yeah. Just lastly also, just as an exit question from my side also, the issue of, and I know you mentioned the interlinkness of the system as to how you can use other organs of government to make your work easier. And I also assume that there would be recommendations in your final report. What would a census exercise look like going forward? Of course, some people would say, is this really the sustainable way to continue doing this? The world has moved, technological advancements and so on. Just on a preliminary basis, in your view, what would a census look like in 2033?
Yeah. So look, I mean, you're so right in terms of the world has moved on. Countries are advanced, and some other countries are using population registers. They are able to use administrative data to be able to make sure that they are able to have efficient snapshots of the country at any point, because essentially that is what the census is. So for you to be able to get to those strong population registers and be able to use administrative data, you really need to have a strong baseline, and a strong baseline in the context that it's adequate, there's quality, and it's up to date, right? And this is what we have done, or rather this objective that we have for this particular exercise. So in terms of your question, I mean, we would really want to look at that, you know, to be able to have administrative data, to have population registers, and have the snapshot more often, even as opposed to the 10-year cycle, because the 10-year cycle is also what makes it very expensive. Yeah. So have the snapshot maybe over a 2-year cycle or whatever it is. And you must have appreciation for this being a digitally enabled census for the first time in the history of our country. Also spatially enabled to the extent that we are able to link data to locality. So there's a GIS system that's as soon as the coordinates are collected by the tablet, and how far the person must be and all of that. So I think it's really it's an encouraging start in terms of where we are going. We hope we can build on this because it will inform all our other surveys in terms of up to date, and also strengthen the internal capacity within the Ministry of Home Affairs. It will also strengthen the Ministry of Health, you know, in terms of do we need more hospitals? I mean, at times we always make the conversation that the hospital is simply not enough, but now we would have statistics that can essentially support or refute that particular observation. So we want to see we want to see policy interventions that are informed by statistics. We want to have these snapshots of the country more often. We want to make sure that some of the issues that we are speaking about in terms of this being an upper middle income country, it comes from the previously outdated income and expenditure survey in terms of the inequalities that exist. So we want to see, is that still the case? Have we bridged the gap in terms of we have now gotten a bit of more broad-based income level as opposed to the 10% on top really accounting for the ones below and subsequently pushing up the average to get to a point where it distorts the picture in terms of the level of incomes for households. You know, so hopefully this will give us a picture, and also the development that's needed in the rural areas, be it schools, high schools, hostel, in terms of accommodation, even roads. You know, the justification for new roads come as a consequence of traffic, and traffic as a consequence of the number of people that have got cars. Because this question is part of the exercise. You know, so this is all to make sure that going forward we can have a smooth and perhaps seamless and not as expensive an exercise that we plan for 10 years in advance.
Well, Mr. Hei, thank you very much for your time this evening, and we wish you well as you wrap up this very important process.
Thank you so much, Matthias, and also to your viewers. We are in the final push. Let them continue to play their part and be counted.
Most definitely. Well, to our viewers, that's it. We hope you enjoyed tonight's show. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place.